superior's obligation. I served with pleasure and cheap. So it turned out they never had to let me out. So everyone was just me, everybody in year 4, 65, 66, we're all involved in extended for a year or more. Our Chapter 71 meets at the Veterans Building in Santa Rosa, 7 o'clock, second Monday for every month. We have vets and non-vets alike, so you can be an associate member. You don't have to serve in the military to be a member of Veterans Peace. What you do have to believe in and work for is following our statement of purpose. So I'm just going to read that right now.
We have a segment. You read that. There will be nothing to say. All we're saying now.
Okay, sorry. We're still working on this. But while we're still waiting for the technology stuff to get synced together, I came back from Vietnam pissed off, but I must confess I felt kind of guilty looking at what these other vets did because I did not protest during the war, and I just put the whole Vietnam experience in a closet. I kept it locked up for 16 years. That is not very healthy. Take something serious war experience and just lock it up, and it didn't happen. But then there's the half-scale replica of the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. traveling, and I said, I've got to bring that to the JC campus. So we started a VBA, Vietnam Veterans America chapter, and 70,000 people from the county came to visit that wall. And it was 12 days there, spring break in 1986. But a significant thing to think about is Vietnam was so bad, in fact, how come you waited 16 years to start speaking out? Well, I don't know. For me, I just wanted to say it was too painful. So, a lot of times there are some vets that get home, whether it's Iraq, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and they hope, I'm okay, I'm an army. And then, so some people will trigger them years later. So, what these guys were protesting against the war while they were in uniform, home, that was not my experience. Sadly, I think many veterans in Vietnam. That's why we have an average of 22 per day committing suicide. They might be in their 60s and 70s, but they're still what they did in the war, what the war did to them. Still, they didn't maybe have physical wounds, they had the wounds of the spirit or wounds of the soul. So for me, I didn't really get out on my healing until I went back. There was a group of veterans out of Garberville. They started Veterans Vietnam Restoration Project, and they sent teams of veterans back. So I would write them a check. One guy said, hey, Tracy, you need to go back for your own healing. So I went back in 2002, and we built 10 houses for disabled Vietcong. And we went to 10 different villages. When I say we built, we brought the money, and we went to 10 different villages and started, laid the foundation, mixed cement, carried mortar. The real building was done by the In fact, they treated us as honored guests. And I don't know about you folks, but if you can imagine Vietnam had come over, bombed the hell out of California, destroyed half of Sonoma County, and while they were here, they killed some of your immediate family, your brothers, sisters, parents, kids, left you with a lifelong disability without an arm or leg. And then 30 years later, they showed up and said, hey, I'm going to build you a new house. I said, fuck you. So I'm not sure what it is about the Vietnamese people, Buddhist culture, which is the dominant Buddhist culture in Vietnam, but that amazing willingness to give me, like our vets, of what we did to their country, to them, was extremely healing. Because I thought, if they could forgive me and my fellow vets for what we did, it was time for me to start forgiving kids, 3 grand, 5 grandkids, and I sure as hell don't want them to experience what my generation did. And yet, sadly, we see it continuing. So the extent to which the military-industrial complex still has a stranglehold in many ways on aspects of our country's policies, us as a society, is really tragic. And again, one of my favorite bumper stickers is, we need smart kids, not smart bombs. And so we have unlimited funding for weapons of destruction, but not enough money to give computers and books to our kids in the schools. Not enough money to pay a proper living wage for teachers. So something is terribly wrong. We've got things upside down in terms of our funding priorities.
Not working on their computers, so we're switching to mine.
Okay, still where we are. Some of the other things, our chapter of Bachelor's for Peace, as we're reaching out to the schools. We speak in high schools and now just in junior highs as well. So we're checking our website. Those of you who would like to have a speaker, have a group of speakers willing to go out, we're just telling our story. Typically. So whether you'd like us to come and talk about militarism or in general, that's fine. Whether you'd like us to come and talk about Vietnam, I spoke to an 8th grade class at San Rosa Middle School just a month ago, and just kind of telling my story of being in a war I didn't believe it, and the effect it had on me. And one of my favorite lines, by the way, it's not just dealing with Vietnam. Sometimes it's dealing to try the best time to stop a war is to keep it from starting. So one of my personal beliefs, one of our risk-based society, is Trump. He wants to be a war president. He wants to invade and attack Iran. So I got a group of vets, and we went to Iran, July of 2018. We joined 6 of us, and we joined with 6 Iranians, and we climbed to the summit of their sacred Mount Damavand. Damavand to the Persian people has the same significance that Ptucha does to the Japanese. It's a focal point of their culture, but it's 18,600 feet high. So it was quite an audacious thing, but interesting. We had nothing but negative from the U.S. government. The State Department said, no, you shouldn't go. They're all just terrorists. The Vietnamese say it's an invitation to come, but they offer to subsidize for 500 euros for each one of us that don't subsidize the cost. So we did. The altitude was a problem. We did 4 days of climatization hiking, but 2 of the 6 of our group had to turn back at 16,000 feet without sickness. But lucked out from changing my breathing technique, talked to me by one of the Iranians. They said I was at 75, the oldest American to ever summit Damavand. So I was proud to hang in there and accomplish that. And Al Jazeera was there and filmed us, sent pictures around the world of the American and Iranian flags being unfurled side by side on the summit of their sacred mountain. So each one of you out there can do something to speak out against the policies of the Trump administration, be it going to war in Iran, be it separating children from their parents, trying to come to this country, putting them in cages. There are so many things that are terribly wrong that are going on by our government. So, fortunately, most people around the world, they know there's a real difference thinking again. Trump's so bad, they got all the other people doing things that I certainly disagree with and are against what I am as a human being as well as an American citizen. And some people said to me, well, okay, big deal. So you went to Iran and climbed a big mountain. You know, how different is it? Trump's going to have a war, he's going to have a war. And my answer to that is, it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. And another thought too, when SJW Bush, the elder Bush, I did not vote for him or support him, but he had a phrase that resonated with me, about 1,000 points of light. So whether it's things here at protest you may have at Sonoma State, whether it's climbing a mountain, whether it's carrying a protest at San Francisco or anywhere else, each time you do something positive to make the world a better place, a safer place, a base without war, point of light. And again, each one of them is pretty small. Collectively, those thousands, 10,000 points of light.
The movie that I've made and which I've watched several times in my life. So she was on the person and I said, well, maybe we should just do it a little bit last time. We can pull up videos of the same one we did last year. I can.
That's right.
It's not my computer, so I have to wait. I still have to wait till she comes back to start pulling up our bits of video. Sorry, I set in all my techniques ahead of time, but they didn't seem to happen. We need another check. They don't have the proper link to the sound.
Yeah, we don't.
If we can do that, that'll probably work.
We don't have access to that.
It's my computer, but if you've got an Apple, that should certainly be able to show my iMovie. Yours
Where's the
is down there.
Just okay. Try.
There's
Sure.
We're planning on playing about
Talking to kids in high school, it's like if someone came in when you were in high school and they're talking, or I was in high school, they're talking about World War I or even World War II. No, or see my eye, or but there's a certain commonality of us war. What we've found, and I'm ahead of our speakers kind of group, is if you go to the administration, they're not particularly welcome. They just see that as something that's disruptive, so on. But if you find a teacher, that's where the key is. If you find a teacher that says, yeah, it concerns me what our country's doing, perpetual war. That's what our talk today is going to be about, perpetual war and the cost of it. So that's, and so what usually we end up talking about is just what war is, and especially in the of bombing and so on, and missiles, the vast majority of people killed are innocent civilians. The last war in which people that were killed were primarily combatants was World War I. And so in Vietnam, the VC wore black pajamas, so did all the peasants in the countryside. They wore black pajamas. So one of the sick jokes was, oh, well, just kill them all and let God separate them out. So, I mean, and I'm not sure who said it, but said the first casualty in war is truth. So, yep, okay.
But to actually answer your question, when you go to Santa Rosa High School, we've been there twice. We have spoken to every junior in the school, and they have, it is done while they are studying Vietnam. Okay,
Dominic,
approve.
Derek. Where'd Derek go?
Connected with the
Yeah, I got it.
okay. You're safe. Okay. Thank you.
Probably this somehow, but I don't dare stick into somebody else's computer. Where'd it go?
Is that me?
Well, we thought they were ready, but it's not showing up on here, so, and they all ran away. He said he'd be right back. I worked so hard to make this a seamless presentation.
This is war. In the middle of the big guns. In the middle of their planes. In the middle of the bombs. In the high behind walls. In the high behind discs. I just don't want you to know I can see through your glass. They turn and run farther when the fast bullets fly. And I'll bet you die. You never come soon. I'll follow your casket. I'll pay after.
Okay, and again, I'm Tracy Ptucha, president of Chapter 71 Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace is an international organization. We have chapters in every state of the United States and in 6 foreign countries, including the UK, Germany, Japan, and Vietnam. In fact, our chapter in Vietnam is one of our more active and productive ones. Again, I was a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy, served 3 shipboard tours in the Tonkin Gulf, calling in airstrikes over North Vietnam, and then one 18-month tour ashore as a field intelligence officer. I want to read the statement of purpose to get what we're all about. We, having dutifully served our nation, do hereby affirm our greater responsibility to serve the cause of world peace. To this end, we will work with others to increase public awareness of the cost of war, to restrain our government from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations, to end the arms race, and to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons, to seek justice for veterans and victims of war, to abolish war as an instrument of national policy. To achieve these goals, members of Veterans for Peace pledge to use nonviolent means and to maintain an organization as both democratic and open, with the understanding that all members are trusted to act in the best interest of the group for the larger purpose of world peace. Okay, yes. Again, we do meet the 2nd Monday of every month at the Veterans Memorial Building in Santa Rosa, northwest corner. And again, we invite all of you who share this vision to come and join us, whether you can be an associate member or you don't have to be a member of Vietnam or a veteran of the military in order to come. In fact, many of our most productive members, like Susan, are not veterans. So now.
So what will be happening is you're seeing stills while we're talking, and then we'll be interspersed with videos. So video is actually not the.
And the meeting started at 7 o'clock, second Monday.
He had more to say, but he said it earlier. We thank you all for your patience. This is the first time we've done this way.
The prolonged U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have been widely covered through the years, but their consequences, including the related violence in Syria and Pakistan, remain poorly understood. When Americans are asked about the human toll of these conflicts, they often think first of U.S. soldiers who have lost their lives or who are struggling with war injuries and trauma. But the true number of casualties is much, much greater. By 2016, nearly 6,900 U.S. soldiers had lost their lives in the war zones. Roughly half of these deaths were caused by hostile fire and improvised explosive devices, along with vehicle crashes, electrocutions, and heat stroke deaths. In addition to U.S. soldiers, many U.S. contractors have died in action as well. The contracting companies, however, have failed to report many of these deaths. A conservative estimate is that at least 7,000 of these workers have been killed in both wars. In addition, for every U.S. soldier killed, 6 Afghan, Pakistani, and Iraqi security personnel have died as well. In other words, More than 50,000 Allied Afghan, Pakistani, and Iraqi soldiers and police have died in combat. The figures available for opposition fighters are controversial because Allied forces have often been motivated to count killed civilians as militants. One estimate, however, puts the total number of fighters killed in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq at 110,000. The largest number in the death toll, however, is not soldiers, but civilians. Living in these war zones, civilians have been killed in their homes, in markets, and on roadways. They have been killed by U.S. warplanes and soldiers, by the U.S. allies, and by insurgents and sectarians in the civil wars spawned by the invasions. The total of violent civilian deaths in the Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq wars are conservatively counted at 217,000. Every single one of these deaths devastates a family and debilitates a community. This total of over 390,000 dead soldiers and civilians, however, includes only those who have been counted as direct deaths, or deaths by bomb or bullet. An additional large number of people have died in these wars by indirect means, as they have in all the wars of human history. They have died due to hunger, disease, or injury that resulted from the war's disruptions and environmental harm. It is difficult to estimate just how many people have died indirectly in these wars, but researchers suggest that in recent conflicts, for every one direct death, there are at least 4 other indirect deaths. A conservative estimate is that these wars may have resulted in the indirect deaths of an additional 870,000 civilians. Unfortunately, these numbers are still estimates, with no party to the conflict taking responsibility for a full accounting of the direct or indirect death toll.
This project is out of Brown University. It's where I graduated during the Vietnam War. They will be printing a letter to their alumni monthly editor from me about the use of their work in our work. Okay, Derek, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Derek West, and I've been with Veterans for Peace now for 5 years. And I know that we're on time constraints and I have a long way to go. And a short time to get there, so I'm going to dive right in. We're going to have a prayer. And I'm going to say a few words about that prayer. I'm an Army brat. I'm not a veteran. I'm an associate member of Veterans for Peace, as Fred was describing. But I am an Army brat, and my father was in the Army back in the 60s. He was in the JAG Corps, and JAG stands for, what does it stand for? Judge Advocate something or other. He was a lawyer. Judge Advocate General. He was, these veteran guys, they know this stuff, not so much me. My dad was a lawyer in the Army, and one day he was assigned what he thought was the unenviable task of defending what was known as a conscientious objector. A conscientious objector is someone who objects to warfare on moral ground. And this conscientious objector was already in the Army, and he was petitioning to get out. His story was that he was drafted, he was went through basic training, he was ordered to Vietnam, and at that point he refused. Said on moral grounds, I'm not going. He refused an order to confront the enemy. That's a crime. And if he is, if he's found guilty of this crime, he's going to get some serious time, Fort Leavenworth federal pen, something like that. These are not decisions that these guys enter into lightly to make these calls. So my father is chosen to defend him in a court-martial. And I think to my father's amazement, he won that case. He won that case, and that soldier went free. He got an honorable discharge, and he left the military. And my father was vaguely anti-war at that point, even though he was in the military. And I think after that experience, he was fervently anti-war, because I think that soldier taught my father as much as my father taught him about the impact of war, and about the impact of participating in a war that you feel is dishonorable and unfair and unjust. So my father was so taken by this experience that he set up a little bit of a cottage industry right there in the Army. He said, you know, I like doing that. And if y'all don't mind, if you could refer all your CO cases to me, I will represent them. And he did. They did. They sent them to him, and he represented them. And we would sit on our porch in Baltimore, Maryland, outside of Fort Meade, where most of these soldiers emanated. And people, soldiers, started knocking on our door, saying, I understand, talking to my father, that you're the guy that gets people out of the Army. And my father would represent these folks. And he would meet with them on our porch and drill them. And he would drill them in all the aspects of conscientious objectorism. And typically it would start, he would assign them readings and writings. You have to read and you have to write to be a CO, conscientious objector. These soldiers would come in and he would talk to them. He'd say, now, young man, tell me your story. And the soldier would proceed to tell the story about why he was opposed to war. My father would listen and go, nah, that's bullshit. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write a 10 to 20 page essay on why you are a CO, and I'm going to assign you a reading. I want you to read, if you guys, any students in here, you can jot these books down. Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. That's a good read. You read that, you come back, and we'll talk about it again next week. And he would come back, and he would rewrite his essay or write an essay. My father would read and go, no, this is still bullshit. I want you to read All Quiet on the Western Front. Go back to your house, your home, your barrack, read it, come back next week, submit another essay, and we'll do this and we'll do this drill again. And this would go on for months. And my father would assign them more and more readings. They'd read Martin Luther King, A Letter from Birmingham Jail. They'd read books on Mahatma Gandhi. They'd read Socrates, written by Plato on Socrates being locked up and non-resisting to his fate. And eventually, these soldiers would no longer be presenting bullshit in their raps. They got it down. There are 2 points that have to occur. There are 2 major goals that must be met for a CO that's in the Army. One, you have to convince a court-martial board that you're sincere in your convictions. And number 2, and most importantly, for COs that are in the Army getting out, you got to prove a moment of crystallization, because the Army, the opposing counsel, will ask them, well, how come when you were drafted or when you enlisted, you weren't so moral then, but when you get orders to go to Vietnam, now suddenly you're very moral. You don't want to go. What happened between then and now? And these soldiers have to answer that question, and they got to convince them. And my father took the tack, well, your moment of crystallization is going to be right here on this porch. Your moment of epiphany will be now on this porch, and you're going to tell them about it. And goddamn, man, it came true. These guys' lives changed. It's very difficult to be a fake CO. If you're going to be a conscientious objector, you have to have it down, and you have to believe, otherwise those guys are going to trip you up in the court martial, and there are heavy consequences to be paid if you're tripped up. You either throw in the towel and say, okay, never mind. You say, I'm not sincere, I guess I will go after all. Or you go to jail. If you stick by your beliefs and they don't believe you, you're going to do some hard time. So these are, there are lives in the balance for these young soldiers. I think people think that COs sometimes are soft or cowardly. That is not the case. They are brilliantly courageous young men. So the first reading that my father would assign to these soldiers before Johnny got his gun, before anything else, upon first meeting them, is Mark Twain's The War Prayer. And we're going to share because I think that this prayer is Mark Twain's masterpiece. And I'm not going to read his whole essay. I'm just going to read the prayer itself. Twain lays out his scenario. A bunch of people are at a church and they're praying for victory. And the minister, he makes a fiery speech and there's organ music going and all this crap and parades and whatnot. And then this old guy, this old white-haired guy steps to the podium and says, I have a message from God. And I'm going to relay this message to you now. God has told me to tell you that in these war prayers, there's always a second unstated prayer. And I'm going to pray the unstated prayer. And it goes like this. So let us pray. O Lord, our Father, our young patriots, idols of our hearts, go forth to battle. Be thou near them, with them in spirit. We also go forth from the sweet peace of our beloved families and fireside to smite the foe. O Lord, our God, help us to tear their soldiers to bloody shreds with our shells. Help us to cover their smiling fields with the pale forms of their patriot dead. Help us to drown the thunder of the guns with the shrieks of their wounded, writhing in pain. Help us to lay waste their humble home with a hurricane of fire. Help us to wring the hearts of their unoffending widows with unavailing and never-ending grief. Help us to turn them out roofless with their little children to wander unfriended the wastes of their desolated lands in rags and hunger and thirst, scorched of the sun flames of summer and the icy winds of winter, broken in spirit, worn with travail, imploring thee for the refuge of the grave and denied it. For our sake who adore thee, Lord, blast their hopes, blight their lives, protract their bitter pilgrimage, make heavy their steps, water their way with their tears, stain the white snow with the blood of their wounds. We ask it in the spirit of love, of him who is the source of love, and who is the ever faithful refuge and friend of all that are sore beset and seek his aid with humble and contrite hearts. Amen. After a pause, you have prayed it, if you still desire it, to speak. The messenger of the Most High awaits. And it was believed afterwards the man was a lunatic because there was no sense in what he said. War prayer, Mark Twain. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dominic Felici, and I get to serve as the president of VICE for our little chapter 71. And I was asked to define perpetual war. Let's see, that's our subject here today, and it caused me to do some reading and writing over the weekend, and I came up with this little talk here that I want to share with you, and I hope you can appreciate. Perpetual war, I've come to understand, is a deep-rooted concept with varying motivations and lots of historical examples, always accompanied by a war mentality and its desire for empire. When this war mentality becomes the way we address problems, it defines the narratives, it narrows the tactics, it limits success of total victory over a perceived foe with the use of force. It's a great simplifier, allowing no quarter for dissent and no courage for peace. I find there are three root examples that you can see make themselves evident in past wars, and this is a perpetual issue. And I find three real sort of ethos. It could be racism, imperialism, or defensive ideology. With racism, manifest destiny, and American exceptionalism, we come because we're gifted, we're capable, and God's on our side. Witness the Western expansion across the United States. Representative William Fells in 1845. We must march from ocean to ocean is the destiny of the white race. This is a motivating issue at that time in the expansion of the United of this place beneficiaries of this were the white Anglo-culture across the entire continent, rail, cattle, mining, manufacturing. They all displaced complex nations of non-white capitals. The second issue is imperialism. Flat out claims that we're here to expand capitalism. And in the war with Spain in 1845, thereafter the United States government had taken control of everything from the Rio Grande all the way to the West Coast, and later wrested Spain's control of the Caribbean and the Philippines. In the course of liberating the Philippines, as was from the Spanish, it should be noted that following its victory over Spain and the Philippines, U.S. military killed 600,000 ungrateful defenders who were, until that moment, liberated. After which Senator Albert Beveridge in 1900 could say on the Senate floor, quote, "The Philippines are ours forever and just beyond are China's illimitable markets. The Pacific is our ocean." The beneficiaries, Standard Oil, United Fruit Company, Anaconda Copper, Hearst newspapers, and all those that fed that whole number of years of war. The third and the most dangerous motivation for perpetual war seems to be the defense of an ideology and the Cold War, which I'm looked at. The war fed by moral and political principles. Two great adversaries, China and Russia. And it was our duty to defeat that ideology anywhere in the world that tended to crop up. Europe, Asia, South America. We could go as far as to destroy the entire planet in defense of this mission. The beneficiary, a vast military industrial complex, whose interest now dominates federal policy and budget, with recent allocations of $740 billion. What I read this morning was that add to that all the other government agencies that have contributions and interest in pursuing the military mission, and the budget comes to $1.2 trillion. So there's this pervasion of war mentality that I want to kind of explore here in different ways. And it kind of comes up in different ways. There was Johnson's War on Poverty in 1964. 51 years later, more people so many people have so little, they sleep on our streets. So few own so much wealth that they have to hide it from the government overseas. This impedes the circulation of money as a blood clot in our economy. Social programs that once fed, housed, and trained U.S. citizens no longer exist. And this is Nixon's war on drugs. 44 years later, we live in a police state, with SWAT teams ready to employ military-grade weapons and tactics against U.S. citizens. A prison industrial complex that has replaced mental health programs, hospitals, and alternatives for U.S. citizens. More dangerous drugs on the street. Then is Bush's war on radical Islam. Nearly 20 years later, with a fear of a stateless adversary which threatens our way of life, they must be stopped before they blow up our streets and our houses, right here. An enemy undefined is living in 76 different countries, requiring 800 military bases, 291,000 people stationed in 172 nations, resulting in a surveillance society where our privacy is abandoned, civil rights undermined, rise of radical, violent white supremacy is about, and now justice for all who can buy it. In closing, to me, perpetual war always costs so much more than we return. It limits our options, it strangles dissent, and robs us of civil rights and justice. And it doesn't work. Thank you. Yes, I did.
I'm gonna see if I can advance this to the next thing.
wants to dim the lights?
That's me and Mosul. We did a lot of raids, house to house searches, and that kind of thing. This is around Christmas time. We were on the Syrian border. My buddy Weston and Duran and Pierce, who was killed. I had to watch Kirkland, our senior line medic, pull him out and everything and put him in the body bag. So that was that sucked.
If anyone's ever had a really seriously broken heart, it is a searing internal pain that really makes you think you want to die. And that's the experience of moral injury. But it comes from losing your sense of who you are as a good person, or from experiencing something, witnessing something, or hearing about something that you can't make meaning of, you cannot take it in, and it wrecks your sense of the world.
He called me, and he had just been there for about maybe a month, and I could hear his voice cracking, and he said, "Mom," he goes, "I'm worried about something." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Will you think less of me when I have to kill someone?" And I'm like, "No, because someone else is making you do that, and unfortunately it's you or them." But so, sent that sweet little boy into that. And I still don't know what went down because he won't tell me. And that's what worries me, because I know there's still that sweet person in there who really can't deal with some of the things he probably did.
War damages the people who participate in it, and especially killing. That the act of killing, even in a just war, even in when that killing is legally justified, exacts a cost on the killer.
I think most people who've had that experience, especially at close range, will tell you that you have a sense down to your bones that you're going to have to answer for what you've just done to something, to someone, to your higher power. And if the war lacks a context, if it's unclear what your mission is, that can be a hell of a burden to bear.
I like to take a general concept of moral injury and relate it to things I personally involved with. On my very first tour duty, I was an ensign, just new in the Navy, and I joined my ship off the coast of North Vietnam, and I was assigned the duty of being secret and top secret control officer. So all I had to do was page check stuff in the vault. Just they were all numbered, make all the pages were there. But I actually started reading those. In the process of doing this, referring to operation orders, I uncovered this conspiracy between the CIA and the Navy to fabricate the Tonkin Gulf incident. You see, for 10 months before U.S. Navy SEAL team had been detached from Navy control and put under CIA control. They would go up with swimmer sappers along the coastline of Vietnam. They go in close, drop the swimmer sappers off. They'd have time satchel charges. So for 10 months before the supposed unprovoked attack, we were blowing the hell out of small ports along the coastline of North Vietnam. So when the North Vietnamese PT boats went out after the Maddox in August of 1964, they were really not going out after the Maddox. They were going out after the South Vietnamese PT boats. 3 days later, another ship went up, the Turner Joy, and I read all the message traffic. They did think they were under attack. They thought there were PT boats. They thought there were MiGs coming. but they called in Navy fighter jets off the carriers and flew right through where these supposed MiGs were, flew it right over where the PT boats were. Nothing was there. Now, I will say that atmospheric conditions, solar conditions in the Tonkin Gulf were very confusing, and I, as an air controller, I screwed up a number of times. But the bottom line is, then there was an after-action report sent saying, look, highly unusual sonar and radar conditions, and no attack actually occurred. So when President Johnson stood up before Congress and the American people and said those evil communists in North Vietnam attacked our ship not once but twice, it was without provocation. He knew that the second attack never even occurred, and the first one was really after those South Vietnamese PT boats run by the CIA. So if blowing up ports for 10 months prior to that is not provocation, I don't know what is. So again, I wanted to bring it public, but I was threatened with court-martial and sent to Portsmouth military prison for revealing military secrets. I didn't have enough guts to stand my ground, and I'll regret that to the day I die. On my last tour, I was, again, a field intelligence officer, so I had to liaison with all the free world, which include Korean troops. They occurred a number of massacres in my province. But the one that brought home a friend of mine named Tom, he was a real straight shooter. Picture of what a soldier should be, West Point graduate. He was a major. But his job was on McAfee, be advisor to the CIA runs Phoenix program. The Phoenix program was designed to go after the Viet Cong infrastructure, VCI. These were the folks that were a shopkeeper or a rice farmer or a fisherman in the daytime and a VC at night. They were the kind of organizers of Viet Cong activities in the South. This was 1960, basically late 68, 69 into 70. Well, they would send out teams, crews, provincial reconnaissance units, to do a body snatch of a suspected VCI, bring them into the torture rooms, and they would torture them. And one guy, and often they killed him. One guy, they were quite sure he was a VCI, but he wouldn't break. They tortured him for several days. So they went back out and sent a crew team out to his village, and they did a body snatch of his 10-year-old daughter. They brought her in, they stripped her naked, strapped her to a board, attached clips to her genitals, and put electric shocks through her. This 10-year-old girl was crying out, "Daddy, make them stop." Finally, he gave them information. My friend Tom witnessed this. He was a straight shooter. He got drunk that night, and he related to me what I just related to you. He said, "Here we're supposed to stop the threat of communism, and we're torturing a 10-year-old girl in front of her father. What the hell kind of country are we to do this?" I said, "Tom, we got to bring it public." The next day, when he recovered from his hangover, he said, no, Fred. He said, I can try to maybe shop the stuff. But, if you bring it public, I should never have told you that. My career's over, and you could be in danger of being eliminated yourself. So, again, I shut up. When we both came back home, we kept touch a little bit, to Christmas time or something. And then one night in 1986, so 16 years after I came home, after Tom came home, I get a call in the night. He said, "Fred, I keep hearing those little girl screams." And I said, "Tom, you've got to go to a vet group, find them." He said, "I can't, I'm too ashamed." I got a call from his wife, his widow, the next morning, said he killed himself. So that level of moral injury can kill years later after the event itself. Now, some of you students, you say, well, hey, that's war stuff. It's crazy. That's not a part of my experience as a student here at Sonoma State. I want to give you a simple example you might relate to. Imagine there's a young student here who's come out as gay, and some of the macho guys start harassing him and calling him fag, and then they start abuse, sending him texts, attacking texts, emails, leaving notes on his door. We don't want fags in our school. And he's so distraught by this. And meanwhile, you have watched this. You've seen it on campus. You've seen it, the word gets around. But you do not do anything to support him, to stop it. Okay, the people that are doing the evil texts and so on, maybe verbal attacks, they are guilty of sins of commission. But if you stand by and watch it going on, you are guilty of the sins of omission, of stuff that you knew were wrong, that are against your moral code, and you didn't do anything to stop it. So I think Martin Luther King said it best, that evil will flourish when men and women of goodwill stand by and do nothing and do not speak out against injustice. So that's a kind of real life that I think you can relate to. Doesn't have to be involved with war. It's just what it means to be a human being.
This is our display.
Oh,
And we created this display, which has essentially 21 crosses. We've had it on the campus before. We don't have it this time, but we take it various places to show how many veterans commit suicide on average every day as a result of what they experienced directly and indirectly when they participated in war. They're going to show you that with this. Shall I advance it? No, I'm talking about the timing on this.
The first casualty of war is the truth. Then it follows that the first battle of any war is won by lies. Lies have always been used to sell war to a public that would otherwise be leery about sending their sons off to fight and die on foreign soil. In times long past, this was easy enough to accomplish. A proclamation by a king or queen was enough to set the machinery of war in motion. But in the modern age of democracy and volunteer armies, a pretense for war is required to rally the nation around the flag and motivate the public to fight. That is why every major conflict is now accompanied by its own particular bodyguard of lies. From false flag attacks to dehumanization of the enemy, here are all the examples you'll need to debunk a century of war lies.
So this is just a tiny clip of the beginning of a full-length documentary, which goes through wars, starting with World War I, and explains what the lies were that were used to convince people in this country to go and fight. So I'm Susan Lamont. I'm an associate member as well. I call myself a veteran of the peace movement. And I'm going to talk about sexual violence in the military. And we often think of it as being essentially what's shown in this cartoon up here, men being violent towards women, which obviously happens. But actually, when you get the statistics from the Defense Department, they provide, you can get all this information online. The majority of sexual violence is men on men. which, you know, I didn't know until I read their statistics, but over 1 in 4 women were assaulted by someone in their chain of command, but 1 in 3 men were assaulted by someone in their chain of command. And most victims are sexually assaulted more than once. And there were over 41,000 assaults that they know of in 2016 alone. That's the latest information. Retaliation is the norm. 58% of women and 60% of men who have reported sexual assault have faced retaliation. And those retaliators are largely, again, within their chain of command. And a third of victims are discharged after reporting, typically within 7 months of making a report. And victims receive a harsher discharge, fewer honorable discharges compared to all service members. 1 in 3 women and over half of men were dissatisfied with the treatment by their chain of command. They found that the military is not very good at policing its own in this particular situation. Conviction rates and prosecution rates are actually going down. As this gets more publicity, there's actually less accountability. And that in 2017, out of all the cases that were brought, only 7.9% ended up in court-martial, and only 3.2% if anybody was convicted. This is all placed a very high demand on the Veterans Administration. In 2015, there were over 1,300,000 outpatient visits to the VA for military sexual trauma-related care. 40%, we know that there's a huge homeless problem in the United States. Huge number of the homeless are veterans. And the majority of them are women with trauma, sexual trauma.
I joined the military halfway through my senior year of high school, wanting to serve my country.
The Coast Guard said that they could get me in within a month. So that shipped me off. The love that I could keep up with the guys and work as hard as I could.
The professionalism, the camaraderie,
Getting out there and giving it all. That's what I chose to do. Everything changed the day that I was raped.
I've never seen trauma like I've seen from veterans who have suffered military sexual trauma.
This goes everywhere with me. You always have protection with Jesus, but sometimes you need just a little bit more. Most Americans assume there is access to a system of justice.
You see a guy get 5 years for drugs, and 2 weeks for rape.
They let this man get away with everything but murder. They gave him Military Professional of the Year award during the rape investigation.
it was a laughing matter.
He says, "You're the 3rd girl to report rape this week. You guys like all in cahoots. He thinks it's a game."
About 500,000 women have now been sexually assaulted in the U.S. military.
Civilians see it as being a military problem.
Anybody can be a victim of sexual assault.
Rapists are repetitive criminals.
Why would they stop?
They go on to literally prey on women and men, girls and boys in our neighborhoods back home.
It's very difficult to do a story on the most powerful institution in the world.
The Department of Defense has a history of covering up sexual offense problems. I don't know who you think elected you to defy the Congress of the United States. What is it you're trying to hide?
And this is a movie that you can see, full-length movie on that topic. So the last cost of perpetual war that we're covering is the destruction of the planet, which is the most imminent threat that we have. So most of the time, one of the prime culprits in the conversation about, left out of the conversation about the environment is the United States military. US military is the single largest user of fossil fuels on the planet. Generates 5 times more toxins than the top 5 major chemical companies combined. As a result of naval accidents, there are at least 50 nuclear warheads and 11 nuclear reactors littering the ocean floor. That's what we know about. In 2014, the former head of the Pentagon's environmental program said that her office had to contend with 39,000 contaminated areas spread across 19 million acres just in the US. And worldwide, the US has more than 900 bases, all of them contributing to the environmental degradation of the planet. Outer space is militarized, and we know now that Trump intends to militarize it even more. The danger of contamination of space through conventional and nuclear explosions in warfare will be real. When I was a child in the 1950s, we were taught that the ocean was too big to pollute. It would forever be a source of food. We now know better, and there is no sense in assuming that outer space, at least the part that affects us, is too big to pollute. We've pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, but what most people don't know is that everything the military does was always excluded from that. And Obama signed an executive order that all offices had to reduce their greenhouse gases, but excluded the military. And the military accounts for 80% of all the greenhouse gases produced by the US government. But you won't see that when you watch corporate news. They're not going to tell you about that. Another thing is we already know the devastation by Agent Orange. Chemicals like that are still used. There's white phosphorus. There's so many things that are out there that are being used to destroy our planet, and it's not being talked about. Only recently has the environmental movement even agreed to mention the military. I asked Bill McKibben to talk about it. We brought him here to Sonoma County a number of years ago. He wouldn't touch it. Couldn't find any mention of the military on the 350.org website. I believe that has changed, but only very recently, because they didn't want to be identified with those anti-war kooks. You know, they were having enough trouble being taken seriously that they weren't going to jeopardize what they were already talking about. So this is the biggest threat to young people, and this is, if for no other reason, to be against the military and be against war. The destruction of the planet is the number one.
Sometimes we think that it's easier to make war than to work to prevent it or to clean up after it.
The military is a major player in terms of environmental outcomes.
The environment is war's silent casualty. When we talk about the costs of war, we rarely focus on what happens to the land, the animals. We rarely focus on that which sustains human life.
We're completely out of sync now in defining threats to our security. At one time, the principal threats were military. They no longer are. They're now environmental.
In the Homeland Security Department, they're thinking about vulnerability and preparedness. We just haven't made the same commitment yet in climate change, but we really need to do that.
At the moment, it's as if we're sleepwalking into disaster. We can't afford to sleepwalk into into the future. We must take decisions and action which create a world that we want our children and their children to grow up in.
Before the first bullet is fired, preparation for war requires the extracting and processing of metals, wood, and petroleum to build infrastructure, manufacture equipment, and develop advanced weaponry. Many citizens don't realize that the U.S. Pentagon is the largest consumer of oil in the world. The list of destruction resulting from war goes on and on. From the preparation for war to war fighting and the aftermath, the environment pays a toll. When we talk about climate, we must talk about the impact of militarism on the environment. We have to talk about ending war.
So that's the end of the presentation, and I don't know, because we got started so late, how much time we have left for questions. We were gonna leave time for questions, and I don't see anybody else coming in to set up, so I'm assuming we can get away with questions. We have to wrap it up?
No, you can go.
Oh, we can go, okay. All right. So then we are open to questions. I would like to just make one point. It's election day. This is not a partisan issue. This is not Obama versus Trump, Clinton versus Bush. All administrations wage war and all administrations lie about it.
Go ahead, man.
Being a teacher, I think we need the intricacies of the global, the war, the military, the violence within the military, and the violence within our families and in our lives. How like there's no degree of separation between these. It seems that this is what's going on at this point in my life. It seems like all my friends are struggling with mental health, no matter how successful they are or not. And the violence in our homes, the emotional and physical violence in our family structures, as well as our military world or life. I'm like a little kid, and I don't know what to say about it, but to me, it just seems like it's been seeping or seeped in always. And it's that I find amazing that people don't see or feel in relation to what it takes to be in denial of the happy, healthy people who stand happy, healthy people, and families and countries and cultures. And what are your thoughts on that? Just intimacy about how we're all a part of that. I don't want to oversimplify it. We neighbors sit around talking about this all the time. This whole country was started on violence and war. So it's not something that's seeping, it is the basis of it. Not a seep. When you see it, it's
And guns.
Yeah.
Also,
we brought him here, didn't we?
Also, Trump, as bad as he is, it's not just Trump. He's a manifestation of all that's wrong in terms. There's no empathy, no concern for the broader community, for those. And if you're gonna be a real asshole, the best way to do it is to always pick an enemy. So the Nazis picked the Jews. Trump is, it's those rapists coming across the border from Mexico. Anyone that's not Anglo-Saxon and male too, because of course women should be property. If you can grab them by the pussy, you're okay. And so the extent he has just taken what is wrong with this country and amplified it like a magnifying glass. And also you have to remember that for reasons I still don't understand, I'm sure there are honorable people that are senators and congressmen that are Republicans, but they don't have the balls to stand up to them. And those that have paid a pretty heavy price. So, anyway, that's not a real answer to your question, except that it is, you can't just focus on what Trump's doing the last 3 years and what, God forbid, he would do another 4 years if he's reelected. But there is something insidious and frighteningly wrong with American society.
But I just want to,
And that, so much of our society is based on one against the other. It's about capitalism, possibly. What I would point to is Fred's experience after going back to Vietnam and being so welcomed by people who were so wronged by these efforts as a real indication of social difference and social harm. And it's up to each individual to find their way to peace and quit using the concept of war to get peace. Let's find a way. There's many reasons, there's many
there's a book called On Killing, written by a guy who's batshit crazy. I've watched him on video. But he works with the study that was done by the Defense Department after World War II, in which they found that 80 to 90% of soldiers actually weren't willing to kill anybody. They would risk their own lives to shoot over someone's head to try to avoid killing them. The Defense Department totally changed the way it trained so that by the time Vietnam was over, the numbers were flipped. Almost everybody was willing to kill someone. But part of that was the bringing of military and violent images into our culture through entertainment and acclimating those of us who might be disinclined to be more inclined. But there's that.
So I think another aspect of the recent discussion has to do with the concept that put down this called the volunteer army. When we were young, we were drafted. That put it front and center for every human being in the ages of 18 to 35. There was no getting around the fact that we were grappling with issues. That's all gone now. It's insidious that there's a volunteer army that's made up of people that are too poor and too desperate to do anything else. So they go join the army, and they're silent because they're poor, they're powerless. You folks in the 60s that were drafted, not all of us were poor and powerless, and we fought back. There's no fighting back today. And like you say, it seeps in because there's no resistance from the perpetrators themselves. They can't do anything about it. They volunteered. Sign up for this. You must want it. Not the case. In the 60s, that's an enormous difference from then and now.
You have a question, Jim?
Thank you so much. I've heard you story before. Pretty wonderful about the things you saw. And I want to relate that to how I felt watching the video that students showed about sexual assault. When I was in the training, I was a volunteer there. There was a lieutenant commander who got out of the whole time. And he said, I am adamantly opposed to sexual assault and rape. It does not happen in my outfit. Therefore, if you report it, I will know your mind.
Whoa!
What I want to ask is, where is the mechanism in place? These departments are places where people are conscious that are being shot, spread off. Things happen all the time. It's important to we need to get out of that situation of self-hierarchical. That doesn't happen in my office. We know it.
My My son-in-law is a Marine, Iraq War veteran who came back anti-war. Then studied sociology here at Sonoma State and was actually one of the founders of Social Justice Week. But he is now a policeman trying to change policing from inside, and he's in North Carolina. And he says there are many, many more whistleblowers and complainers from within than we ever imagined, and they are completely ignored. And my daughter expects him to eventually lose his job because he complains so much. But it's going to be that kind of risk.
Could you speak up, please?
Yeah, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, talking about what you said, how it's really important to also realize that trauma gets passed on to generations. So the point about how this country is built on war and violence, like that gets all built down through generations. Even, you know, populations like minority populations, people of color that deal with one thing, like it's up to us to unlearn that trauma so we don't have that forward. And it really is a shame that like we live in our country in the world and we don't have any mental health services for people. And also the point that they brought up about poverty and how that's kind of shifted where we get full time serving in the military, I think is really important because the military will come like at JC, they will recruit at the JC and talk about like talking about like we go to college for free and we have all these programs that you can do and like it's great, you just have to like serve. But like I recognize like I've always been like that. I have a lot of respect for people that do this, but there is a lot of
Thank you for your comments. Mel, I think you wanted to say something?
Oh, it was back on the other subject. There's a longer story attached to it. I ended up in the hospital and where I was assaulted verbally by this started my young right back then. And then I cried and I cried outside the office where they helped me to get assaulted. So they put me in the bed and the nurse came and took me to have sex with me in the closet. And then I reported that, and then the guy I reported that to, he kept sending me notes from that phone back on my side to take me off base and have sex with his son. So it's really interesting out there. You know, you go to serve and it's not yourself. It's gonna take a lot of work.
You know, our whole culture is saturated with that, and so then you put it in a really top-down macho organization, it's going to be even worse.
Yeah. Basically, what's going on is the Taliban agreed not to attack U.S. or NATO forces, but they did not agree to stop the violence. So they seem to feel free to continue fighting against the existing forces of the Afghan troops. So that's why it seems like a very dumb agreement. But for what I understand, that's part of it. And yeah, that's a very key point. So, but I mean, when you have a country, it shows how the arrogance of power of the U.S. to go ahead and negotiate a treaty, and as Tom just said, without the assent and cooperation of the Afghan government itself.
I know that, I'm just curious, what role a security of a country could play. So in other words, when I hear anti-military, I'm hearing you say there's absolutely no reason ever to protect them.
If we give that up, that's not what Veterans for Peace is for. We're not anti-war, I mean, anti-military. But, okay, my father was a colonel in the Marine Corps. Our family dog's name was Gung Ho. And, you know, he showed me spit shining my shoes when I was 6 years old. So, I'm not a pacifist. I think there are times when it is necessary to have a strong military. So I don't have a problem with having a strong. What I do have a problem with is we've got enough nuclear weapons to destroy life on this planet. And one of the things that Obama signed before he left office was at the beginning of the renewal kind of our nuclear arsenal. So we should be just doing away with phasing away with nuclear weapons. So it wasn't just Trump. So we spend more on military than the next 5 or 6 countries, including China and Russia. So it's just so way out of balance. And you know, if you think about how much money it makes to build a bomb or a missile, those Tomahawk missiles, Trump fired 52 of them against an airfield in Iraq. They're $250,000 each. Okay, and it's nothing. And yet we don't have, again, enough books and computers and everything for our schools. We have an infrastructure falling apart. We have all kinds of problems that money could, and we would be a stronger country, not weaker. So I'm not talking about doing away with the defense department. I would suggest changing the name back to what it was prior to 1947 when it was the War Department. I really think that one change, more money for the War Department, would have a noticeable impact. So that's one thing I'd like to see happen. But if we can cut our defense spending in half, we'd still be spending more than what we need, but it would be a little more step in the right direction.
Did you have a comment back there that you were going to respond to her?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, when I say anti-military, I'm not talking about like. Yeah, sorry, when I.
Stand up and speak a little louder.
When I say like anti-military, I'm not necessarily talking about just like getting away with the military. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I'm anti like the military industrial complex. It's a much bigger system than just the military. You know, we have to look at the Department of Defense spending. We spend more than half of our government budget just for military and for building like nuclear weapons and planes that don't fly. Like all of that money could be diverted into other resources that would benefit all of us. Yeah. Oh, and I just wanted to share that the book that really
Bob? Rob, could you stand so people back home?
Yeah. Some dental work. But most of us who went to Vietnam, our fathers fought in World War II. So we had a concept of a just war. I know that I was one, I went along with that whole thing that I could trust the government. You know, so it's not that we don't believe there's some instances where hiding is justified. Because let's face it, I mean, there are some forces out there that want to enforce whatever their policy is on a refund. And at some point, you have to punish them. But it's the professional war, it's the system that uses war as an instrument of power.
Our military, or any other looking for a model of military around the world that I would trust. And that's what breaks my heart, is I feel like, yeah, I had the World War II, I also met one of my favorite human beings, a survivor. And then I met young American men who saw their own troops do horrible things to them and children and other people. So I just want to break down and say, where is this great military going to come from that we trust? I don't trust and nationalism. I don't trust nationalism. I don't trust military. I mean, I'm ready for an entirely different world. I can't imagine how we can keep these models right now. I know there's going to be danger. I don't know. I wouldn't be on a side. I don't have a side. I don't have a country. I don't have a place. But I actually feel they're actually going after my morals.
Here, here. I think we need to envision something else, and if we are envisioning no military, it might actually get us at least partway there with a world that doesn't need it as much.
I would suggest if you're looking for a model, try Canada. They're about as close as I can think of what I'd like to see.
Horrible to their native people.
Not bad. The other thing, if you want to read just one book to give you a context, it's called The Devil's Chessboard. The Devil's Chessboard is one of the best books I've ever written about the CIA and its machinations that have created so much of the problems we're dealing with today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being so patient with our technology.
Yes.